Hey, Dana.
Hey.
What's going on?
No.
Okay. Sorry.
Things are good. Things are good. I'm excited to be here. I feel like we haven't done anything like this in a really long time.
Haven't.
So I'm excited.
I was on your podcast. So this is Dana, Real Food with Dana. I'm the Castaway Kitchen. And I was on your podcast when Made Whole came out, which was covered over a year ago. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But we're hanging out today. She's in my house, which is awesome.
Gonna cook some food.
Yes.
Talking about a lot of deep stuff.
Yes, which often happens.
As soon as we got here.
Yeah, very intense. Coffee talk was very intense.
Yeah, get out of traffic from DC, come here, get coffee. We're like, let's go right into it.
Right.
Honestly, that's like why I appreciate our friendship so much, because like I hate surface level friendships and conversations with people where you feel like you can't really talk about like the deep stuff. So yeah. I appreciate you.
Likewise. Thanks. We wanted to share with you guys. So we were like, you know what? Let's kind of recap a lot of our conversation on camera for our viewers, for you guys, because there's really good insight here. Dana is a clinical nutritionist. I mean, she's been doing this for a long time. She was a Whole30 coach. She's helped so many people. And if you follow her page, she's like really big on like the undiet. And I love her approach. And I think that while we have different approaches, we're also coming to the same realization. And I think a lot of people are. This discovery of not one extreme or the other, but what is that middle ground? How do we get there?
Yeah.
And where do restrictive or elimination protocols, do they have a place?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny. I feel like you might have like confused people about me by what you just said, because people are like, wait a minute, you're a Whole30 coach, but like you do the undiet thing. So like,
well, you were a Whole30 coach.
Yeah. So like a little bit of background is like I came from a history of disordered eating and eating disorders, and then kind of like as I was having all these different health problems, latched on to all these different elimination protocols to, at least outwardly, I was saying like, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Really, it was another way to control my food that was like more acceptable, right? So then I kind of like latched on to Whole30 of like, oh, this is a really good way to like figure out my food sensitivities, right? And like, if you're just listening to this and not watching it, heavy air quotes here, right? Which is like what a lot of people do. And that's not to say you can't figure out your food sensitivities by doing an elimination diet, but that's not really what my like underlying factor was. It was like, ooh, I can get, even smaller by doing this and restricting my food, and kind of like looking for a way to control my food,
right? Because
I felt like everything else in my life was going out of control, right?
Right.
So then from there, I realized that like all of these different elimination protocols, like no matter what they are, if you have a history of any kind of like feeling like you're on and off the wagon with stuff, whether you want to call it yo-yo dieting or just like jumping from protocol to protocol, if you have that in your history, then it's really easy to turn any of these protocols, whether they're therapeutically designed or whether they're not, whether they're just designed for weight loss, whatever it is, it's really easy to turn those into disordered habits, right? Which is then when I realized that a lot of people were using the Whole30 in particular in this way, I decided that I was done.
Right.
And so I kind of like came out, if you will, in the beginning of last year that was like, look, this is a pattern that I've been seeing, and I can't support this anymore because I feel like a lot of the ways that people are using this program, and many other programs in particular, but I wasn't a coach for those, right, are promoting disordered eating habits, and I don't want to be a part of that. So then I kind of went like way to the other side, which is where a lot of people end up is like, oh my God, like, dieting is bad and like, all of this stuff. And it was just like pretty extreme. And then finally through working through a lot of clients' issues and like my own hangups about all of these programs, you kind of like come back to the middle ground where like you have to acknowledge as a practitioner that for certain health conditions, therapeutic protocols can be super helpful, and have their place. The tricky thing is,
but
yes, if you have any kind of history of disordered eating, or if there's trauma there, or if you have a history of trying to control your food, or, if you just like feel better when you're calorie counting or macro counting or any of these things, which like guaranteed every single person who's watching this like can fit into at least one of those categories, right? At least in some point in their life, even if you don't realize it. You need, when you undergo any kind of protocol or whatever it is, you need to work with someone who understands that as your background and who can see what is the point at which this is now becoming more of a disordered behavior
Right.
and not as healing as it could be, right? Because like we were just talking before we started recording, is like we've both kind of reached this place of balance, but we still have boundaries. Like I have celiac, for example, so that's part of my like food neutrality, if you will. Is like, yeah, for some people that would be a restriction, but for me, if I eat gluten, I end up in the hospital. So that's like a non-negotiable for me,
Right.
and that doesn't seem like a restriction to me. For you, like nightshades and a couple of other things, like with all of the issues that you've dealt with over the years, like at one point those were like, no way am I ever going to touch
Right.
those. But now it's like, okay, well, I know if I eat those, like it's not going to be as bad because you've been able to do a lot of healing. Right. So,
But the healing also came from not stressing. I talked to people about this. Like there came a point where I realized that I was still so reactive to foods for two reasons. One, I hadn't dealt with the root cause because I had done AIP and I had done keto, but I hadn't addressed the SIBO. I hadn't addressed low stomach acid. I hadn't addressed some internal trauma and things I was still dealing with. Once I started unpeeling those layers, I was able to then also just make that mental shift where I sat down to a meal at a restaurant and I'm like, I'm going to order a glass of wine. I'm going to eat this food. Like, of course I asked about gluten and nightshades, but you know, I wasn't 100% the server was like tracking me, but I was like, I can sit here and stress, or I can just drink this glass of wine, chill out, eat this food, and I know I'm not going to die. Like I will be okay. And I realized like this perceived stress was making me so sensitive, and I was falling into this like food fear pattern. So letting that go was so important. And so I like that you mentioned that there are foods that like we have to kind of be like gluten. And so something I should talk about in my next book, which I really struggled with wording on this because I don't, again, like, you know, like it was it reminds me of like what is it? Not Whole 30, Weight Watchers, and the point system, or like Noom and the red, green, and yellow foods. And so, but something that I feel like where I've gotten is like I have my feel good foods. These are the foods that I eat every day without any sort of like dark chocolate, coffee, vegetables, protein, fats. I can eat these foods till the cows come home. No restriction. I feel amazing with any amount of these foods in my diet. Then there's my worth it foods. My worth it foods might be cheese, like dairy products, or beans or rice, where like if I eat them every single day, I start going, or like popcorn, you know, like I don't feel amazing, but you know what? I can totally have them sometimes when I feel that it's worth it, which could be Sunday night movie with my kid, eating some popcorn or eating out at a restaurant, and they're fine. But then for me, my hard no foods are nightshade and gluten, like because they make me sick. And I think that we can have those boundaries, but use that in an intuitive way where it's not about over restriction for the sense of control.
Yeah. So when I'm working with my clients, what I always say is like, I want you to get the maximum amount of healing with the least amount of restriction possible.
Yes.
And it takes a long time to be able to get there, because you mentioned something that I think is really important to like go back to. It's like sometimes just the stress around these foods can cause you to have a reaction to them. And so then it's going into, okay, well, what's the root cause of the stress around those foods? And sometimes it's a subconscious belief that we've kind of like osmosis like absorbed into ourselves, whether it's from like, you know, your aunt was doing keto and then she was talking about it all the time, and now you think like all carbs are horrible subconsciously, even though, you know, you've heard all these other things. It's like, no, carbs have like fiber and they have all these other things, and you know, whatever. So it's just, we have these conflicting beliefs because there's so much nutrition bullshit out there, right? That's coming from like bro science, and then there's also evidence-based nutrition science, but that also is coming from everything from paleo to keto to, you know, all
to
these
vegans.
other things.
I mean, like you can get a study and prove almost anything when it comes to nutrition. It's wild.
Which is why it's so confusing, and like my heart goes out to people who don't have a like extensive background in nutrition, because how are you supposed to be able to figure out what is right versus what is fake science versus what's actually going to be right for you? Because there's a lot of validity in all of these different studies, whether you look at carnivore or keto or, you know, everything in between.
Right.
But at the same time, just because there's validity in a study doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work for
like
you.
Said, what's going to be right for you, and that you can say that. But I feel like that's such a harder thing to sell, because saying, sorry, there is no manual, there is no one size fits all. You have to do the work and find what works for you.
Yeah.
It's so hard. People like to rally under the same flag. And I have also like omnivores. Like we have like, even at like, I was thinking of paleo effects, like the issues that are going on right now, talking about like, meat is bad or meat is good with these game changers, and all these documentaries and things. Omnivores are the worst. Like we cannot agree on anything.
Yeah.
Like if we had our shit together like the vegans, we would be like changing the world. All the cows would be grass fed. Like everyone would be happy. But like we can't agree. And that's the thing. We have to agree to disagree and say, I respect your approach and what you're doing to honor your body. I'm gonna do the same thing. Peace.
Yeah. And I think it's so hard too because like this like middle ground that we're talking about, it's not sexy. It doesn't go viral. It doesn't sell.
No, it's not like clickbaity.
Yeah, exactly. It's not clickbaity. It's not SEO, search engine optimization. I was actually just thinking about this morning. Is I think that also like this is such an like America problem, And I was thinking about this because we live in the DC area, and like I'm not gonna get political here, but I'm using this as an example. Is like our country is a two-party system. There's a reason why the third party always fails, right? Because you're either on the right or you're on the left. And even if you're within those two spectrums, you're on one of those sides. And it's the same thing with food. It's the same thing with religion. It's the same thing with all these things. It's like you catch people's attention when you say something that's like, what? But you don't catch people's attention when you're like, just this is the way that it actually works, but it's kind of a more neutral approach to things. Right. And it's keeping in mind that, you can take things from vegan and keto and paleo and all of these different things that you've tried before. You have to like pick and choose to figure out what's going to work for you. And also with like a dose of humble pie, knowing that like what works for you right now might not work for you in 10 years, 5 years, a year,
right? Or like a week. Like, I was telling, I was telling like Leanne, like my dietary needs change so much based on my cycle. Yeah. Like the way I eat in my follicular phase and my luteal phase, like two different people. Mm-hmm. Like my needs, my cravings, my sleep, my energy levels, like, and there has to be an ebb and flow. Like we're not static. And I think that's like, I really like, your approach. And obviously when we work with clients one-on-one, and like, as I do, you realize that middle ground, that bio-individual approach, it's actually what truly works. And we see amazing results with the people we work with. And it is harder to sell that. Cause we can talk about, okay, if you need to do an elimination protocol to find out your trigger foods, but let's move away from that phase as quickly as possible and reintroduce foods, but make sure we're optimizing like the foundational health. And we talked about upper GI. We're like, how is no one talking about this? Everyone is obsessed about gut health. I'm like, listen, your gut isn't going to go anywhere if your upper GI isn't working properly. And one of the biggest like, like wrenches we can throw in that process is stress.
Yeah.
And it's like, we can say stress management till we're blue in the face and like people just don't implement it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other thing is like, even if you're at a place symptom-wise where an elimination protocol would be super beneficial for you, if you're not mentally there, like if your stress is huge, if you're still in this, like you keep going back and forth between protocols and stuff, that might not actually be good for you right now, right? Even if doing, let's say like a low FODMAP protocol would improve a lot of your gut symptoms, if you're still stuck in I either have to be doing this 100% or I'm not doing anything at all,
right?
That's not the right place for you to be right now. And it's so hard to tell someone that, because if you're feeling as bad as both of us have felt before, like if you're in that deep dark place with your symptoms, you are willing to try anything to get out of it. But then the problem is like with stuff like SIBO, people will get put on the elemental diet, which is just like, all these shakes and like very basic foods, and they do see a remission of symptoms in like 2 weeks. But then what happens after that? It's basically like being on a juice cleanse for 2 weeks. And then you're like, I want all of the things that I wasn't allowed to have. And then you see a remission of the symptoms. Like they come back.
Right.
And it's so tough because people will come to me after being put on these different protocols by practitioners, or they've gone on them themselves, and like they're just mentally, emotionally, physically, they're all in completely different places. And it's just honestly seeing where you are and then taking baby steps in the direction of just like feeling better. It's
Right.
so tough.
Well, I don't even put people on like any kind of protocol that's like supplement based, especially SIBO, until like month 3. Like we work on, I mean, like people don't realize the small changes are going to be so big. Like if we make changes, if your sleep gets better, if you start pooping regularly, like that's a huge win. I'm like, listen, if I can just get you to like not be constipated or actually have formed stools versus loose, like that's a huge win, because why are we going to jump into a SIBO protocol if like you can't, you know, like let's baby steps here. So we work on those things. I'm like, hey, let's work on, you know, making sure you're drinking enough water, making sure you're getting enough sleep, nutritional deficiencies. Like that's a big one that I like to like, you know, through food, right? Like let's look at your diet and be like, you know, people come to me, I'm like, if you come to work with me, I'm going to tell you to eat liver or oysters. It's going to happen, but I'll give you recipes. So, you know what I'm saying? Like I work on these things because like we have to build this foundation where you have these habits that are like second nature that are really going to support your system before we put it through anything else. And like, I was telling her, like people come to me and like, yes, I do keto. I wrote a keto paleo AIP cookbook, like, you know, but they're surprised when I don't do that. They're like, oh, you're not going to put me on AIP keto? I'm like, no, actually. I'm like, we're going to try and add in some foods. And I often don't put people on a full elimination protocol. Actually, if I do that, I actually customize it. Because I'm like, hey, do you drink, let's say, cashew milk? Or do you have coffee? Or what are some foods that might not be AIP compliant, but that totally work for you? Like, we know they're fine for you.
Yes.
Why would we take them out? Why would we take them out? Like, if, you know, like seed-based spices, like, you know, cumin, like, or black pepper. Like, there's no need to omit foods if we're pretty, like, certain that they're, you know, I always tell my clients, you already know. Like, I know you think you don't know, but you already know exactly what you're reacting to. Your body knows, your intuition knows, you're just not listening.
Yeah.
Let's get there.
Yeah, and that's a really big thing is like through all of these different elimination protocols and diets and whatever, we've all done them, right? And there's no shame in that because that's what we were taught, right? We were taught the answer is do all of these different protocols to figure out what your symptoms are, and then you do another protocol once you figure out what it is to fix yourself, right? But then we've been so used to, and you know, this includes therapeutic protocols, calorie counting, macro counting, all the things. We've become so used to relying on the yes and no foods or the counting or whatever it is, the stipulations of all of these programs that we've been listening to those. We forget how to listen to what our bodies are telling us, right? And we also then have, especially if you have anything like an autoimmune disease, you've kind of learned to distrust your body because you're like, wait a minute, I know tomatoes are healthy, but they make me feel horrible. Like, body, how could you freaking do this to me? It's like that meme that goes around every flu season that's like, my God, body, I ate a vegetable. How dare you get sick?
Right.
You know, like that kind of thing. And then when you learn to not trust your body, of course it's hard to listen to it and hear what it's actually saying because you're afraid to trust your body.
Right.
You know, like at that point, you're like, what am I supposed to do? I've been listening to these external things for so long that I've forgotten how to listen to my internal signals, whether that's reacting to or hearing what a symptom actually means, whether it's a nutrient deficiency, it's a digestive thing, it's like it's causing you brain fog, whatever it is. And it's so hard. And I have so much compassion for people because we've all been through the ringer.
We've all been there.
Right? And I think that's a big part of it too, is like a lot of people when they've gone through all of these things and they've realized like, oh, I've been caught in the cycle for so long, they like either get mad at themselves or they get mad at all these different protocols. And it's like that negative energy that you're now carrying around is not going to promote your healing, right?
No.
And it's very valid to like experience and validate that anger at first, but then like let that shit go.
Right.
Like it's not gonna help you heal. No.
Something you said, the compassion piece is so big, and I think that not a lot of practitioners have it, or even just nutrition plans. Like I get clients that come to me and they're doing these different programs and they're definitely based on like maybe weight loss and they're over restrictive, and when they, you know, say like, but I'm hungry or I don't feel well, they get shamed.
Yeah.
You're not trying hard enough. You still need to eat. Let's just white knuckle through it, you know? And I'm like, no. Like, I've been there. And we were talking about this, like, you know, and again, to listening to your body, one of the big things is hunger signals that are really out of whack. And people always feel like they have to go to a place of over restriction to get back their hunger signals. And I don't find that to be true. Like for me, I was someone who like, I never knew what it was to sit down to a meal hungry because I grazed all day. Mm-hmm. So intermittent fasting allowed me to I remember sitting down to a meal and being like, oh snap, like I'm actually hungry and this feels amazing. But I also, if I was fasting and I started getting like the, you know, and like, hey, I'm like feeling a little cold. Like for me, my hands and feet get cold when I need to eat. It's like sign number one. I'd eat. I wouldn't say, oh,
not in my fasting window.
You know, it's like, man, because you have to do it every day. So like having that flexibility to like, hey, if I'm tapped into these signals, why would I then ignore it? If fasting allowed me to tap into my hunger signals, next time they came a knocking, why would I be like, psh, you know,
body, you're wrong.
You're wrong. Like, I think it's a beautiful thing to like really understand what's happening, you know, with the leptin and the ghrelin, with your hormones. And that's another thing. When you're, you know, healing your hormones, it's such a big factor. And our hunger signals play a big role in it. And we both talk like, you know, especially we work with a lot of women. We work with a lot of women, any woman today, modern day, like whether you're work from home, stay home with your kids. I don't care. You're stressed out because it's just society.
Everybody's stressed
everybody, because it's just the overstimulation. It's the traffic. It's the nonstop, you know, like we're just constantly, you know, consuming just so much, like there's noise and media and everything. It's a lot. We're living in a time that's not conducive to our health right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, then they wonder, well, I feel like crap. My hair's falling out. I can't lose weight. My period's out of whack. My skin's breaking out. And it's like, but then they think, well, they have to eat less or work out more. And something like it can't be farther from the truth because, you know, I was just saying, like, I could eat 1,600 calories a day and I could eat 2,600 calories a day. And guess what? I'm not going to lose or gain weight either way. Like, so why would I eat 1,600 calories? Like, unless I just really wasn't hungry. You know, it's one of those things that restriction isn't always the key. And when you know, for me, like protein is so big, like especially for your hormones, if your hair is falling out, like if you know, want to retain muscle, like I think when people, that's something that they, for some reason, like, protein is something that gets cut out, that gets like kind of cast aside, like either on keto because people say, well, I can't eat too much protein because gluconeogenesis and I gotta just eat fat, or because protein's bad for you. And it's like, oh man.
And then you have the people on the other side who are like, well, just eat only protein and all the carnivore stuff. And it's like, oh God.
Yeah. And again, I mean, like, you know, again, middle ground. And I feel like, you know, people ask me a lot about carnivore because I do eliminations like AIP. I feel like because my AIP keto overlaps, so I feel like I get a lot of them. And like, I always tell people, I wouldn't do it long term. Mm-hmm. I feel like there has been a place, and I know my mom had a colonoscopy, so she had a cyst removed from her colon, like literally like wound in her. So of course, what digests upper GI? We don't want anything passing by that wound. So I put her on like a 5-day like carnivore, like slow cooked meats and bone broth. Mm-hmm. She healed beautifully. When I have a flare, my clients have a big inflammatory flare, and especially if they have like a lot of bloating in their colon, bone broth fasts, slow cooked meats, super easy to digest. Mm-hmm. There's benefits there. However, I am a fan of plant fiber. I am a fan of, you know, polyphenols, and honestly, it just makes food fun for me.
Yeah.
So I get it. There's people out there, there's anecdotal data. I think beef and meat in general is really healthy, but yeah, I think that big extremes that last forever, like a lot of people in carnivore, like, well, I can't digest anything else, or I can't digest vegetables. I'm like, right, but cutting them out forever isn't addressing why you can't digest them.
Yeah, and it's only going to make it worse.
And it's only going to make it worse. Your body becomes more intolerant to things. Yeah. So I think that getting past, like, you can go through the restriction tunnel, but let's come out the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a big part of this that's kind of like driving this problem that we have is that for the longest time, until, you know, recently, and still there are a lot of people that are kind of here, is that we associate success not with the remission of symptoms, but with weight loss, right? And so it's like, if you say that success for you, for whatever it is that you're doing, equals weight loss, if you don't see weight loss with whatever it is you're doing, then you've failed. Right. So then what I try and do, because we know, and this could be, you know, a 6-hour podcast or like video.
We'll have to break. We were going to do this for IGTV. So we're obviously going to break it up into segments because we're over time. It's okay.
Exactly. But we know that weight loss does not necessarily equal better health, because just being in a smaller body does not mean that you're healthier with someone who's in a larger body, right? So what you kind of have to do is redefine the definition of success, keeping in mind that just losing weight doesn't mean that you're going to be healthier, right? Like for some people, weight loss comes as a result of doing these elimination protocols, but they actually are more stressed, their hair is falling out, their blood sugar numbers are out of whack. You're not actually healthier then, right? And it's also thinking about like, what does healthy mean to you? What is the definition of healthy for you, right? Because if you're defining better health as weight loss, it's fine. Then, I'm not saying you're wrong, but you might want to reassess what that is, right? Because like, if that was my definition of success now, then I was healthier when I had an eating disorder and wasn't eating anything and was bulimic, right? We know that's not true, right? I am much healthier today being like literally 50 pounds heavier than I was when I had an eating disorder. But that's really hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around, right? Whereas like, if you look at it objectively, is like, somebody could be very sick at any body size. You could have metabolic syndrome, diabetes, cardiovascular disease if you're in a normal or underweight BMI, and you could be perfectly healthy according to all of your blood markers and everything at a higher BMI.
Right.
So it's like, well, why then can't you see that somebody could be healthy for all of the blood markers and all of the ways that they assess health at a lower body weight or a heavier body weight?
And that they feel fine. And I feel like what's sad there is that the person who's otherwise healthy at the higher BMI, then the only reason they don't feel good in their body is because of the external influence of society telling them that it's not okay. And I get a lot of clients who come to me with weight loss goals, and I tell people like, I get it. I had weight loss goals. I lost weight when I changed my diet, and I don't shame people for that, because I agree. And I think we talked about it. So like, I have a lot of trauma as growing up overweight, and people suck and they're mean and you get traumatized when you're bullied or made fun of or whatever, like told that you're not good enough because of that. And I empathize. I have so much compassion for those people, but I always say, we are going to nourish your body and address the foundational health. Weight may or may not come off at that point. However, once we have all that, you can implement some appropriate movement for your body, and then whatever weight you kind of land at, when you're nourished and feeling amazing and in remission and you're active and you feel great, that's probably where you're supposed to be. Because if you have to return to a place of over restriction to maintain your weight, guess what? That's not your weight. It's like your and I feel like a lot of people get into that, because like, if you have to continually do, extended fast or do these, resets continually, like you yo-yo the 20 pounds up, 20 pounds down, 20 pounds up, then just, like, find a way to be happy with those 20 pounds on your body. And like, because guess what, your body needs them for some reason. Your body needs them, like either for hormone balance or for something. And I feel like, I was telling Dina, like, I am 15 pounds heavier than my lowest weight. For me, when it was a big deal, when I lost weight, and like, when I started gaining it again, like seeing the scale move up a little bit, I was kind of like freaking out. But I realized I got to that lowest weight during my book launch. I wasn't and moving, and I was overstressed and definitely under eating. I was like living off bulletproof coffee and not eating enough meals. But when I put on that weight slowly, it wasn't like, I feel and I look better because my body, it could be, I think it was honestly muscle too, because I started like, but I just stopped caring. I really was like, there was the first time where I was like, the scale has like, I'm no say in my success. Because I was like killing it at the gym with my weightlifting. I felt strong. I felt good. I feel good, like where I am now. And guess what? I've maintained that weight effortlessly. Feeling great, killing it at the gym, being in the best health of my life. And it's not a failure. It's not a failure.
It's really redefining success and redefining what health means. And then it's not just weight, and for most people it's not weight at all, right? And so it's figuring out what that is. And then what you were saying before is like, it's really hard for people to accept that their like ideal weight is different than what their body thinks is their ideal weight, right? Because we've been so influenced by all these like external factors and society and, you know, whatever. And like, if you've grown up in the era of like the 90s,
Kate Moss,
the
skinny,
Kate Moss,
skinny,
the stick thin supermodels, and, you know, everything before that of like the 50s pinup girls and everything like that is like, it's really hard to accept that what you think is the best weight for you is actually different. Like, your body disagrees with you, right? And so once you get to that place where like you're feeling good in what you're eating and you can go out for cocktails with your friends and like, you know, every once in a while you can like do the things that you enjoy and you're not like overly restricting yourself and you move in a way that makes your body feel good, like that's probably where you're meant to be.
Right. It's like, do you feel happy? Like, I also feel like, I ask my clients, like, do you have energy to do the things that you want to do?
Exactly.
Are you sleeping well?
How's your digestion?
Like, are you pooping good? Like, how's your hair? How's your skin? Like,
are you cold all the time?
Are you cold all, right? And I use myself as an example because I'm like, people are always like, on Instagram, they're like, my God, your skin looks amazing. How's your hair so full? Like, you know, you look vibrant, you look
like,
healthy.
I eat.
I'm like, I eat food. I'm like, it's food, baby. And I eat a lot of food. And maybe someone, a person could look from the outside and think that my way of eating is restrictive for me. But I was like, I'm like, no one's healthier than me. Like, I have very high standards for the food I put in my body because there was a lot of layers to heal. I mean, not just like physical, emotional trauma, like my autoimmune condition caused emotional trauma and continues to, there's scars on my body. There's physical manifestations that I can never get rid of and can never forget on my body that further put me outside of the normal beauty standards, you know? So it's like, there's a lot, people, there's a lot. And so could I by regular beauty standards, I could be smaller, I could be skinnier. But you know what it would take to get there? To lose everything I've worked so hard to feel. Mm-hmm. To have the energy to play with my son and go freaking take up mountain biking with my family and to weightlift and to dance and to run a business and to be a mom and like all the things that I can handle. Like, we can do hard shit, and it's because we're healthy and we're resilient. And that didn't come from a place of restriction.
Yeah.
That resiliency didn't come from restriction. It came from the work we did after to build back, to add in, you know, to support.
Yeah. You can't live a life of abundance from a place of restriction.
Oh, say it again. Anyway, this has gone way longer than we thought it was, but we're going to break it up into sections. Yeah. Anyways, so you can follow Dana at Real Food with Dana on Instagram, on the internet. She has tons of recipes. She's taking clients, I think.
Yeah. I can also put this on my podcast. So if you guys want to like re-listen to this,
right.
I'll put it on there, and then, you know, we can do all the things.
All the things. Christina at the Castaway Kitchen. You can find me at thecastaway.kitchen.com and buy my books.
Buy all her books.
All her books. They're awesome. Yeah, the food's good. The next one will be out March 2020. I made Homemade Simple, and it really delves into what we talked about today. Applying foundational health, like what to do with all that information and even the information that you've acquired from restrictive protocols, but to move forward, to nourish your body and just, you know, again, like the changing seasons, like Dana said, like what works today might not work forever. So really having the confidence to be like, I know my body, I don't need an external, you know, factor to tell me what's happening. So high five.